Welcome to another episode of Subconscious Realms. I'm your host, General Lynn, and for tonight's Swapcast, in attendance as my co-host, we have the host and creator of the Metamindcast podcast, Sir Robbie Marks. Now then, Robbie.
Hey Lee, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good, mate. For tonight, right, looking forward to this, mate. We have fascinating on the agenda, and no doubt things are about to get weird and wild with tonight's guest. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host and creator of the YouTube channel Understanding Conspiracy, Paul Stubbs. Now then, Paul.
Now then, how we doing?
Good, mate. I'm good.
Yeah, doing great.
Yeah, so both me and Robert are fascinated in Nephilim look like clowns theory, and you are the man for this.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad it piqued your interest. It's nice to speak to somebody who is relatively close to me as well.
Yes, mate. Yeah, I'll do that road, answer.
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's I've made many a trip down to the IKEA there in Warrington, back and forth. So yeah, it's I'm very familiar with the area. But it's odd. You don't often find people in England in the conspiracy game, to be honest. They're a rarity.
No, it is a road delighted indeed. But speaking of IKEA, do you ever get the hot dogs somewhere?
I have tried them a couple of times now. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, but
not too bad, are they?
They're all right. They're all right. We tend to go to the cafe, and get the meatballs and the usual.
Oh yeah, they're nice. A bit too posh in there for me though.
Excellent.
So, mate, where do you want to begin with this, Paul?
Well, I could basically explain quickly what the theory is. I'll give you the quick elevator pitch, and then maybe from there we can just go into the details from the beginning, I suppose. So the theory, as it's called, is the Nephilim looked like clowns, and it's a bit of a what would you call it? A bit of a hook title. It's to draw your interest and pique your interest and get you in. Okay. But as I explain what the theory is, you'll understand it's a bit more complicated than simply the Nephilim looking like clowns. Because first of all, clowns didn't exist when the Nephilim roamed the earth, so it's a bit of a reverse. My wife is constantly telling me your theory is actually, or should be called, clowns are modelled after Nephilim. But I think the Nephilim look like clowns is a bit more catchier and rolls off the tongue. But she'll argue to the death that I'm wrong on that one. So, but to sum it up very, very, very quickly, what we call a clown in the modern Western world, the stereotypical white-faced, red-haired, wide-eyed, big red-grinned, red-nosed, multicolored pattern clothing circus performer. That type of clown, a very specific Western style of clown, which came out through the 20th century out of the circus and the early 19th centuries out of British theatre. That was actually a purposefully crafted occult symbol created by secret societies to copy and mimic the same visage of demons in Europe and in India. And the purpose for this is because in these other practices and cultures all around the earth, they have this practice called ancestor spirit worship. And a lot of my work shows that if you explore a lot of these continental ancient shamanistic cultures, they tend to dress like clowns in order to channel their ancestors. Now, each culture has their own aesthetical, stylistic way of doing that, their own unique spin on it, but you can pretty much pick about 3 to 5 clownish features from each culture, some varying differences, but they all tend to white the skin up, add red to the mouth or the nose, put on some kind of red headdress made of feathers or reeds, or a golden headdress bejeweled with diamonds, adorn themselves in multicolored ribbons or psychedelic clothing, and then perform long, drawn-out rituals, including taking psychedelic drugs or dance of some kind or rhythms, and the jingling of bells in order to channel spirits. Now, what we did in the West was basically copy what they do, and they created a thing called a clown and the costume of a clown. But in the West, it's hidden. We don't realize that that's what the purpose of that costume is actually for. And I do believe the secret societies use this costume to create stronger portals to those who wear it, stronger channels to the spirit realm where the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim reside. Because the Nephilim or as these other cultures call them, their ancestors, had surprisingly clownish features, which we can get into as the show goes on.
Right.
With Paul,
Yes.
would you say that the same concept would be like for like a lot of the Asian when they do like a theatre, don't they, when they wear masks? I think that's the same kind of concept.
The kabuki theaters of Asia, yeah.
Yeah, like that, yeah.
Yeah, and there's also the face changes as well of China. They all tend to, whenever you see the vision of an or an oni demon or an oni mask, which comes from that region, or a dragon mask, what you're seeing there
Like a
is
Hanyu mask as well.
yeah. So what you're seeing there, Tengu is a good example as well, a big long red nosed demon, from Japan with wings and it's got the claws of an eagle on its feet and everything. But what you tend to see is a bulging eyed, wide grinning, sharp toothed monster of some kind. And the Japanese versions of that, which you often see in kabuki theater, the Oni demon mask, is actually not as unique as to Japan as you would think it would be. You'll find a very similar style of mask all the way through the Indo-European regions, the Oceanic regions as well. You'll find it up through Americas and into Europe as well, within Greece. It's almost identical to the visage of the Gorgons as well, which are like Medusa. It's a good example of that. So that wide-grinned, sharp-toothed tongue sticking out, bulging-eyed, perma-smile look that a lot of these masks have is basically a direct representation of that culture's version of a demon. And all demons are the disembodied spirits of Nephilim. So every culture has their own way of describing them, but you'll see a common thread throughout all of their representations. They're all describing the same things, the same creatures that mankind once had to deal with in the antediluvian age. Kind of like a memory that's haunted culture, human culture, all throughout the centuries, basically, in the decades and the millennia. So yes, that particular thing, the theatre mask, people who are watching my show may see images come up on the slideshow of this example as it goes on. But yes, it is definitely a part of the same thing, I would say.
So with the idea that the ancestors of ourselves, in a lot of the cultures, when they pass away, they go into the center of the earth, or awaiting end times. How much do you think that these Nephilim spirits that are associated with the dead giants of old that have kind of entered into the earth are confused with the people as far as their family members? Because this whole idea of ancestor worship, and how they would have libations and basically pour and feed the dead, and getting into all that, how much do you think there's a crossover between the Nephilim and the actual communities of ancestors per se?
Well, it's a complicated question that does require me to give you a bit of backstory to biblical history, which I think has all the answers for these things, to be honest. Now, my theory is based solely in, you wouldn't have this theory without biblical history, is what I'll say. I do think the narrative of biblical history explains perfectly the situation we're in, especially when it comes to spiritual warfare and the nature of spirits and what it means to communicate with spirits. I don't believe when they refer to ancestors, they're not really talking about their great aunties or uncles or grandma or granddad or the long lost, bizarre human ancestors from the ancient past. What they mean are the ancient builders of their civilizations. They're talking about something far, far older than all of that. Now, if you look into
Nimrod and
even further than that, I think what you have to understand, and I think Gary Wayne laid this out perfectly in his explanation for where the Nephilim come from, and a lot of my work is his foundation. I think is brilliant, and I've built upon a lot of what he's explained about the history of the Nephilim. But to understand it very quickly, the Nephilim are the offspring of a particular class of angel that was supposed to be watching over us. They decided to mix themselves with human women. I believe it was the daughters of Cain specifically, who had a very pale complexion due to a certain mark that Cain had to have. And this white-skinned mark may explain why the Nephilim had such a distinct white skin, like a clown, to be honest. But after they were
red hair,
and the rest, yeah. So once they were produced, they were revered as heroes at first. They were considered something magnificent and wonderful and awe-inspiring. I mean, it's a giant. How would you react if you saw one, you know? But they also had very divine, insane-looking serpentine features to them as well, by virtue of their parents, who were the Seraphim class angels, which are otherwise known as fiery flying serpents, which is where the word seraph derives from. So these fiery flying serpents mixing with human women would create quite a psychedelic thing indeed. You have to understand, reptiles are very colourful creatures. They are not dull by any stretch of the imagination, and their offspring would have had very similar features, which is why the clown looks the way it does. But we can get into that later. To summarise what happened when these things were around is they very quickly became corrupted. Humanity could no longer sustain their appetites as they got bigger. They basically ran dry all the grain and the food that was grown from the ground, so they began to turn on the humans and eat them instead, and eat all the animals and just utterly destroy the earth in the process. They very quickly positioned themselves into all facets of rulership over mankind. They became the kings, the ancient kings and rulers of all of the antediluvian age, by virtue of their sheer fearsomeness and size. They weren't necessarily the most intelligent of creatures then. Though I would say they're extremely intelligent now because they've been around for thousands of years in spirit form. But when they were initially around, I think their pride and hubris got the better of them. They quickly subdued all of mankind and put them under their dominion. And mankind capitulated because who would stand up against a giant? You know, it was that kind of situation. And they answered to their parents, which were the corrupt fallen angels who were in rebellion with God at that time. Now, these are the creators of this ancient civilizations. These are the ancient kings and rulers of a ancient past. These are
the Atlanteans.
Yes, and yeah, they are the ancestors. These are the ancestors we're referring to. That's what they mean. These cultures who call them their ancestors believe they're responsible for everything, including their structures, their religions, their buildings, everything about their culture. So that's why they call them their ancestors. So it's kind of a bit of a translation issue, because in the West, we think ancestor just means old human from the past of a lineage, of a particular lineage, you know. Maybe ancestor's the wrong word, but I don't think we have a decent enough word in our own lexicon to translate it well enough. So to them, what they mean when they venerate their ancestors, that they mean the ancient gods. They mean the Nephilim. So that's why when they dress the way they do, they have these wild serpentine, clown-like feather motif, multicolored, fractaled, crazy patterned ceremonial dresses they wear, because they're trying to emulate or look like something that they want to channel specifically. And
now, I have a question for you.
Go.
As far as when you start looking at the different high priests of the different cultures and how like John the Baptist wore the fawn skin, you get the Nimrod with the leopard skin, you get these different skins with the spots and the speckles. Do you think that has anything to do with the communication with these underworld beings within the mystery schools?
Maybe not. I don't know if people can truly communicate with Nimrod, for example. It is said that
no, I mean those people having those symbols being communicating with the ancestor spirits.
Highly likely. I do think any society that is entrenched in the occult is basically it has their own way of being connected to these spirits one way or the other. What I would describe these secret societies as are the physical foot soldiers for the spiritual war we're currently involved with. So these secret societies, let's say the Freemasons, just as one example, they answer to the Nephilim spirits in the spirit realm. But those Nephilim spirits answer to the angelic heavenly fathers who created them, the fallen watchers. But those fallen watchers answer to Lucifer or Satan in rebellion against God. There's a hierarchy, there's a structure to this war. Just like every military has a hierarchy, I would say the secret societies are just the grunts on the front line in the physical realm doing the wills of their fathers, the serpent seed, you know, the people they claim their own connection to, their own lineages to. And whether that's true or not is not actually clear, to be honest, but it's certain that a lot of these secret societies do believe themselves to be the descendants of the dragons, you know.
They claim to be, yes.
But whether that's true or not is up for debate, but they certainly believe they are. So that's why, I mean, they answer to the Nephilim spirits. The Nephilim spirits answer to the angelic parents. So yeah, wherever you see it, they're in constant communion with them, which is why the clown is such a handy tool for them. The costume of a clown. Um, they have a way now of dressing in a ancestor ritual summoning garb, the costume of a clown, without us realizing that that's what they're doing. It's an occult symbol. It's a hidden symbol. So they can do it publicly, and we would be none the wiser. And in true sadistic, underhanded fashion, they've molded the clown to be something innocent and harmless and for the kids, you know. Or at least that's what they tried to do. Nowadays, more people are terrified than clowns than ever. But that isn't stopping them from pushing it on us, though, as a culture. And one of my recent videos, I think episode 43 or 42, was about this, how there has been a huge drive over the past decade to put the clown back into the consciousness of society, and also to make the general populace in these Western societies start to venerate the clown, want to dress like it, think it's something cool and fun, and they're highly popularizing it among the public. And that's also a very clever tactic, because if they can get people dressing like clowns, then they're opening up more stronger channels to the spirit world for those vessels to be possessed by the spirits. Because these cultures around the world, they know you dress like something, you dress like it to be possessed by it. That's the whole point. You dress like a thing to attract the thing. Now, there are certain naive cultures, I would say, who think you dress like a demon to scare demons away. Those are known as apotropaic cultures. They have an apotropaic view of the whole situation. But they can't both be right. You can't have one culture over there dressing like demons to scare them away, and another culture just across the lake dressing like demons to be possessed by them. They can't both be doing this. One of them's wrong. And I would say through evidence that the ones who think they're scaring away demons are wrong. They're dressing like things and creating all these stronger channels as a result. So like I said, you always find like the Joker, for example, or Stephen King's It. There'll always be a reboot. There's always going to be a new model and a later iteration for the next generation to follow and dress like during Halloween. Because if they can get more people dressing like those characters, they can get more channels open. And ironically enough, Halloween is Samhain, which is obviously the Northern European Celtic religion, which basically is when the veil to the spirit realm is its thinnest, as they say. And during that time period, they get as many people as possible to dress like clowns. You know? It's kind of a joke when you think about it. But yeah, so I rambled on a bit there. But yeah, in terms of secret societies, they use it as a tool. It's an occulted symbol, and I can get into the creation of the costume, so we can understand why that is the case. That I'm not just talking out my ass here. I actually have the receipts. Okay, this is something that they seriously do consider no laughing matter.
Paul, sorry to interrupt you, mate. With regards to secret societies, particularly Freemasons, you've got like offshoots like jesters and Shriners.
Yes.
Do you think they would have any part in this?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Maybe the highest levels.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You have to understand, in terms of even the hierarchies of secret societies, you have the Freemasons first of all. And I think there are probably lower levels below that. You have like hunting clubs and things like that prior to that, which are of a similar ilk and associated and affiliated with more local, smaller versions. But if you do become a Scottish Freemason of the Scottish Rite and you go with the ranks of the 33rd degree, you will then be invited, or you have the ability to join the Shriners. And once you get to the Shriners, I think there's 13 levels to the Shriners. I'm not 100% on that, but it would make sense if it was 13. Once you become a higher level, well entrenched Shriner, and you're up there, you may be invited, and it's invite only, to the Royal Order of the Jesters. You are not allowed to ask to be a member. If you do, you'll never be a member. That's how it works. You're blacklisted instantly. You can only be invited to be a jester.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and we have to understand those Shriners have their own. Every shrine in America has their own section within it, which is the clowns. And Shriners dress like clowns. Yeah, you look it up. You can type in Shriner clown. And they're actually, the Shriners took over all the circuses. They pretty much own every circus in America, or the traveling. They have the largest traveling itinerant circus in America as well. Shrining and clowning are one in the same, and you have to realize once you get to these higher levels, once you get above Freemasonry, and you've already realized Lucifer's real and he's the true god of the world from their perspective,
I'll be alone.
and so forth, and you become a Shriner, and you start getting into all the Sufi mystic stuff and all the Middle Eastern mysticism, which is what comes with the shrining. It's odd that a club that's dedicated themselves to Middle Eastern iconography dress like Western clowns, isn't it? And they have make a serious habit of it. They're very serious about it. Why? Why? It's because it's the gods they're in communion with. It's the same.
Yeah, it's like as well. It's like the children's hospitals linked to shrines as well, which again you hear about the elite paedophile rings linked to that as well, which we're seeing that more and more now.
Oh yeah, well. I'm writing the book on the subject. Okay, the Nephilim Clown. I've just finished the chapter on the Royal Order of the Jesters and the Shriners and secret societies' involvement. And it's only so much I can actually probably say in the book about the Royal Order of the Jesters, without probably putting my life in serious danger. To be honest, they are an extreme. All I've done is talk about what can publicly easily be known. Okay, and even that is very, very, very dark.
It's a taboo subject, isn't it? Really is.
Without trying to give too much away and get myself done by the YouTube overloads and the algorithms, it seems it's basically a human trafficking organization which provides sex slaves to the rest of the organizations below them. But the clientele or the victims of that trafficking are of a certain age, which is extremely problematic, shall we say? And that's basically what happens once you become a jester. You are the most depraved of the most depraved. That's why you got invited. You got to be there because you are, from their perspective, you're cool. You're down to clown. You're you know what I mean. Clown. You're that's basically how they see it. And they call themselves a charitable a tax exempt charitable organization. So they do all this at the taxpayer's expense, by the way. And they basically say that they're just dedicated to having fun and bringing mirth and good times to everybody.
Right.
But what they define as a good time is not what normal God-fearing men would consider a good time. And again, it's only so much I can say on YouTube, but I was sick to my stomach when I actually started hearing all the court case accounts and the eyewitness accounts and the whistleblower accounts of what's going on in that organization. And you have to understand that's the highest level. So these people consider it a high honor to be labeled a jester. It's of the highest honor to be labeled a jester. Do you get what that means? They consider something akin to a jester as the highest of orders within their secret societies, because they're talking about their gods, and they know where the jester truly comes from. They know what the clown truly is. It's a symbol that represents their gods, and they are now equivalent to, at that level, a true demon in their eyes, and that's why they get the label of a jester. So
that would lend to the idea that the jester with the king, in regard to being able to say anything and without having to worry about the retribution of the king.
Yeah. I mean, if you even think just symbolically about that, if all the kings and rulers consider themselves to be descendants of Nephilim themselves, with the divine right to rule, having angel blood in them, to have somebody dressed like a jester in their ear is somebody channeling their very ancestors that they believe they're connected to. The jester, So are jesters really court fools to make the king laugh? Or are they perhaps basically court mages,
mages
of some kind, magi, who were channeling the Nephilim on the king's behalf, in order to get advice on how to best rule the kingdom? Because don't forget, these things used to be the rulers of all kingdoms. So it's you have to reconsider history. A lot of history is a lie on that matter, But maybe we can get into what we do know about the history of the costume of a clown. So,
yes.
First of all, clowning, being a comedian, is far older than a clown. There's always been funny men throughout history forever. Okay, there's always been mimes and what the Romans were called sanios, which are basically like a proto form of fool or jester. And there's always been those all throughout history. They're not really relevant to what I'm talking about. So a lot of people seem to get hyper fixated when I talk about these things, about the archetypical meaning of what it is to be a comedian. That's really not relevant. We're talking about aesthetics here specifically.
Mm.
Okay, so let's get it. Let's not try to hyper philosophize what I'm talking about, and let's just talk about the obvious things we can visually know and see. So after the collapse of Rome, theatre acting, these people were considered basically akin to prostitutes. They were the lowest of the low. It was frowned upon to be considered an actor because you're a liar by virtue of being an actor, you know. So a lot of these theatre performers and actors of the time coming out of Greece and Rome during the collapse of the Roman Empire kind of were out of work, and that's where they started to find themselves doing private shows for courtly people, rich people, the ones who were allowed to have comedians who were above the law, you know. They found a lot of work doing that. But a lot of them actually left Rome and started to travel Europe in bands or groups of performing troupes, and this was called the Commedia dell'arte movement. And they found their work by basically traveling around and putting on quick makeshift performances in very quick makeshift stages, and then quickly moving on to the next city to do the same thing again, just filling their hats with coins after the performance. You know, very, very on the move, constantly on the move, very quick, all improvised, just wearing masks, you know.
Terry Gilliam in a lot of his movies has representations of figures that travel around and do this.
Yeah. So the thing is that they had stock characters. So they were characters that no matter where they went, the public would recognize. So the police officer, the rich old man, the soldier, the poor fool, the drunk. You know, they had just generic people, you know, very generic characters that everyone would recognize, and they each had a mask to represent it that kind of became staples, and they kind of developed routines which became expected of the performances, you know, and it almost started, as for something that was improvisational to begin with, it started to become very uniform and predictable. But after, you know, basically 1,000 years of developing this through the Middle Ages, you know, coming into the 1500s, the 1600s, into the New Enlightenment period, shall we say, you would find that somehow around that time period, about 1650, a new character was introduced called Harlequin. And now to introduce a stock character is no, you know, that decision doesn't really get made lightly. And you have to understand what it means to be a stock character is something everybody would recognize. And everyone knew what Harlequin was. It was the demon. Now, this was picked up not only through obviously representations of the court jester, but also during the time of theatre during the Middle Ages, the devil was, you were only really allowed to do hyper-Christianized plays. And obviously the jester was always akin to the devil in most of these plays. That's what it was always referenced as. So they adopted that, first of all, into their model called Harlequin, a very jester-like physique and character. They also modeled after a lot of Mediterranean gods like Hermes or Dionysus. Hermes being the messenger of the gods, very fleet of foot, almost as though he could fly, very quick-witted and witty, you know, had his caduceus staff, you know, the staff of Hermes. So Harlequin kind of had that aspect going into his model from this Mediterranean tradition. Also Dionysus, the patron god of theatre, the fallen angel who had a band of merry men who followed him around, who became satyrs and fauns and maenads and transformed into beast men. Bacchus, yeah, which is the Roman version of Dionysus, you know. And even he had his own staff like Hermes, you know, the thyrsus with the pine cone on top. Very phallic symbols, very phallic related symbols. So that Mediterranean tradition merged with medieval tradition of jesters, but also a very specific thing was added in as well, where Harlequin gets its namesake from, and that was the tradition of the wild man. Now, this traveling group of performers in Europe went all over Europe, from Portugal all the way pretty much into Russia in some cases, all through the Middle Eastern Europe, the Balkan regions, you know, all through the Mediterranean, all through northern France and through the Danes and Sweden and Finland into England. You know, they traveled everywhere, and they kept noticing everywhere they went, there was this ancient demonic tradition of the wild man. and something akin to like Lent, where there was this period of a wild festival of excess of drinking and partying just before the fasting period of Ash Wednesday and things like Fat Tuesday, you know. There was always, it's kind of like a Catholicized version of an ancient ritual. They kept witnessing this Wilderman tradition where people would dress up in multicolored fractaled ribbon clothing. Think Morris dancers, for example, in England. Something like that, you know, but they would also have the Green Man tradition where they would have this weird giant face covered in leaves and psychedelic patterns. People would dress in like Eastern Europe as like wild, hairy beast men with horns and wild, big, smiling, jagged teeth. Some of them wearing fractaled, multicolored, patterned, diamond bejeweled clothing as well in the Romanian region, things like this. In Portugal, they had the Carretos, which were these furry clothing with just green, yellow, and red lines going all the way down with this demonic red and black mask of a devil. You find the Lazarus just south of them in Portugal, wearing straw bodies with these literal horned demon masks with serpents all over them. It didn't matter where they went. It did not matter. They all had a tradition of the wild man, and the wild man is literally a giant, hairy monster. It's a Nephilim creature, basically.
Like a Sasquatch?
Including, yeah, it's basically the Europeans' version of Sasquatch, yeah, which is the North Americans' version. But in all throughout the world, you have a hairy, tall beast man in every culture. It doesn't matter where you go. And I've wrote about that in the book as well. I've laid out every example. Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, mate.
Right.
With regards to Sasquatch, particularly, there's a Nephilim offspring called the Eliud, Eliud. Is this connected?
That's what I have been proposing for many years. Yeah, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's probably where they got it from. I don't know if I was the first to say this, but I have speculated on this a lot in many podcasts. And from my research, it does seem like there's many levels to hybrid creatures and the cryptid phenomena. If you go back to the book of Jasher, for example, it explains that just before the flood, there was the mixing of kinds. So humanity was mixing flesh with animals and creating chimerid hybrids like Mothman, for example. You've got dogmen, you know, lizard people.
Dogmen.
Yeah, lizard people, things like that. So most cryptid phenomena, I believe, are remnants of those humans who corrupted themselves and became mutants, basically. X-Men, if you want to call them anything. They used to be men, so they're now X-Men. You know, that's the name. It's very clever. And obviously, I think that came after the fallen angels, the Watchers, were bound in chains for creating the Nephilim. So the Nephilim actually wiped each other out in bloody, brutal wars. Think Clash of the Titans in Greek mythology.
Yeah.
And then after they were all dead, humans corrupted themselves instead. You know, it didn't end. They wanted to be like Nephilim. So I came up with the term. They Nephilimified themselves.
And Enoch,
but just
basically called out, you know, all the fallen ones for corrupting the birds of the air, the fish of the sea. Oh yeah,
absolutely, yeah. But you have to understand, the Nephilim, when they were knocking about, they also had children. Okay,
right.
They mated with women as well. So the angels mate with women, create Nephilim. And then those Nephilim rape women, and they give birth. And then their children rape women and give birth as well. And then you get in lesser, smaller versions of Nephilim then, which are like 1/4 Nephilim, then 1/6 Nephilim, 1/8 Nephilim. You know, the corruption starts going down. And those initial offspring were known as
similar to a demigod.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Demigod, kind of.
Yeah, but the OG Nephilim were pure angel and human mixed together, half and half. You know, they're the original OG Nephilim. They're the ones who looked the most like a clown. They're the ones that this theory is modeled off, and they're the ones that the seriously just trapped in this spiritual fractal matrix on Earth with us currently, which people call DMT jesters today. You know, that's what they are. But I do believe they had lesser iterations, their own children and grandchildren mixing with humans, which were like watered down, still big, but not the size of mountains, which some of these first Nephilim got to. And I think they got hairier and more strange traits as they went down. And I do think Bigfoot, or these wild men, are the literal descendants of the original Nephilim. So they are the Eliud or the Elio. I think that's what they are.
Mm.
Only because they exhibit extremely psychedelic angelic traits whenever people discuss encounters with them. They can control people's minds. They can warp through trees as portals. They can do really weird stuff, which you wouldn't expect a human who corrupted their DNA with an animal to do. So that tells me they must have some hyper divine nature in their DNA, giving them abilities beyond the scope of normal physics that we understand. Which is why I'm more inclined to believe that the Bigfoot phenomena is angelic in nature, therefore probably the offspring of Nephilim. Personally, that's what I believe. But bear that in mind. So let's come full circle then. Those creatures, the Eliud I'm talking about, these Nephilim offspring, they're the ones that Harlequin was modeled after. So the Europeans had their gods, and they mixed that with the Northern Europeans' wild man, and then you get Harlequin. Now, originally, the Italians pronounce it Arlecchino. The French pronounce it Helikins. Helikins is Harlequin. That's the same. That's where they got the name from. So the French version of the wild man, there's a 10th century monk who described witnessing Helikins with his band of roving hybrid demons who went from village to village just causing chaos and mayhem, during the wild hunt, as it was called. And it was a tall, hairy beast man with a huge club over his back. Okay, and now Harlequin, his original dress was tufts of multicolored patches of hair on a white loose garb with a club. And he had a mask on which was black, covered in hair with a little horn, very beast-like, very, very wild beast looking, with an angry, wide-eyed looking glare on it. That was the original Harlequin. So Harlequin is literally modelled after Nephilim demons of Europe. Quite literally. And that was the first proto-clown character that we know of. The very first one. And go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, mate.
Yeah, go ahead.
So like Hollywood, DC Studios did like Harlequin character what recently came out, glorifying it. Is this just the same? Is that the same kind of character?
Well, yeah,
even though it's a female.
Harley Quinn from the DC universe is modelled after the Harley Quinn or Arlecchino of the Commedia dell'arte. Yes,
right.
It's just a female version of the same thing. Yeah, it's the and obviously it's just the modern way of popularizing the old ideas. Now Arlecchino or Harley Quinn was basically the demon character of the early Commedia dell'arte through the 1600s and the 1700s going into the 1800s. But during that 300-year period of development of his character, he stopped being so rude and crude and witty and naughty. He was using his stick to poke up people's backsides, pretending it was a phallus, you know what I mean, doing all sorts of horrible sexual things with it. It would eventually develop into more of a fancy lad about town who was always chasing after the daughter of the rich man. He kind of became like more of a toff, His character changed throughout iterations, and the gag would be he would steal or run away with the daughter of the rich man. So Columbine, who was the daughter of Pantaloon, would get with Harlequin and they'd run away together. And then the rich man would get his servant, Pedrolino, and chase after them. And the whole show was the chase scene. That was the gag. And that got really popular in Britain. It was called, that's the pantomime in Britain. And they would end with the harlequinade, which is the chase scene. So in Britain, it became this thing called the harlequinade tradition. And again, he wasn't demonic by this point. And there was kind of a void. Who's going to play the role of the crude demonic character? And the British version of the clown, who is Pedrolino, developed into this drunken lout, the servant of the rich man, became in Britain what we call a clown. And this is where clown first becomes a thing, really, as we know it today. Prior to that, Pedrolino was a bit of a shy character. He was one of the zany characters. Sure, he was a comedian, but he wasn't as bashful and loud as clowns today as we know it. In fact, you would find in France, for example, they developed a character called Poirot from Pedrolino. And Poirot is very soft, delicate, sad, a very sad clown, crying. Poirot's iteration of Pedrolino, the servant of the rich man, the French version, he was actually really, really sad because the daughter wanted Harlequin and not him. So it was a bit of a real pathetic, sad sack version of a clown, and that's That's the French version, but the British version was just wild. He was nuts. He was just a crazy, I don't care about anything type of lunatic, you know, and very drunk and all over the place and greedy and foolish and loved sausages and all these type of things. And, you know, was a very bad servant, didn't really care about his boss at all or trying to help him get the daughter back. He just cared about having a good time and having a laugh during the whole process, you know. But the costume of the clown was still pretty boring at this point. It was still modelled after the boring, plain white servant rags, which it had been for hundreds of years in the comedic art movement. It hadn't changed at all. And then this is where things get really interesting. So Harlequin, no longer acting like a demonic character, a void needs to be filled. Clown took over that role. And with that change in character from the clown to Harlequin, the handing over the baton of who's going to play the demon now in modern media, Clown also had a costume change. So it no longer wore the boring, plain white servant rags, and it got dressed in an extremely psychedelic, multicolored pattern, fractal, wild-looking thing. Okay? So far removed from the original costume, you have to wonder where the hell that came from. So I looked into it. Why the sudden costume change in the 1800s? Bang on, 1799 to 1800 is when this happened. Why?
Yeah.
What's the motive? You know, where did that come from? Why that model? Like, where did that come from exactly? And I did some digging. It turns out Charles Dibdin was a very prolific Freemason of the day. He's a part of the Leicester Lodge. He was, I don't know what degree he was. You never find that kind of information out. But I did find a eulogy dedicated to him in a log of a meeting in the same lodge 100 years after his death. They did a eulogy to the long-lost great brother, Charles Dibdin, and the amazing work he did for our lodge, you know. So he was a member. I have the paper for that. Anyway, he was an incredibly famous playwright, musician, songwriter, theatre playwright, all that kind of stuff. He was just in the industry of entertainment. He was very prolific. He was very famous. He was up there. He wrote maritime, wartime, singing shanty like songs for sailors of the British Army, and they all sang them, you know, and he was considered one of the people who kept the morale up for the military during that time, and he's equated as being like one of the people that helped them win a lot of their wars because of his songs, keeping the spirits up of the soldiers. He was honestly, he was a venerated Freemason of the entertainment industry, a pure mogul of the time, you know. No one even knows about this guy, but you know, for like the mid
culture creator.
Yeah, for like the 1780s, there was no one more famous, you know, than Charles Dibdin. Anyway, Charles Dibdin spent a lot of time in India. His brother Thomas Dibdin was actually a soldier in the British Navy, the East India Company, who was colonizing the east of India at this time. He actually died over there, his brother Thomas, and he made a song about it, which became very famous as well. But Charles Dibdin was considering moving to India, because obviously during that high colonization period, there were a lot of British affluential people moving to India at that time, you know, mainly for the better weather. If you can afford it, why not, type of thing, you know. But his boat got stopped due to bad weather, and he decided, I'm going to stay in England instead. And that was in about the 1790s, roughly, something like that. So he spent a lot of time in India, is what I'm saying. He went back and forth a few times before deciding I might live there, but decided against it. His brother was spending a lot of time in India. So the Dibdins were steeped in Indian iconography, no doubt. And as Freemasons, I believe, they obviously, traveling men, wherever they travel to, they check out the local ancestor spirit worship of the day, of the culture, you know, to find out what the Nephilim look like over there. How do they venerate the Nephilim, you know? And I think what they did, Charles Dibdin Sr. must have seen the statues in the temples of Thailand, which represent the Rakshasa demons or the Asuras who guard the temples, because the costumes they are wearing on these statues is identical to the first costumes worn by the clown. Identical. There's no getting around it. It's the exact same costume, and with his connections to India, it's apparent to me that's where he got the inspiration from. Now, so what happened is in England during that time period in the 1799, his son, Charles Dibdin Jr., was given the position of leadership over Sadler's Wells Theatre, where these shows were happening at the time. Okay, so the son of a famous Freemason with the same name took over the most popular theatre of the region, Sadler's Wells. Okay, and he was writing all the music, all the plays, and everything for that. And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as far as I'm concerned. His son was also probably a member of Freemasonry, though I'm struggling to find any record of it. But by sheer virtue of it was his son who decided. I'm going to change the costume of the clown, and decided to model it exactly after Rakshasa demons of India. It has to be from his father's influence. That's all I can consider. It has to be.
Yeah.
But the clown he dressed up was someone called Joseph Grimaldi. So Joseph Grimaldi was a young actor at the time, looking to make a name for himself. He's the one who is credited with inventing the costume of a clown. But when you look into it, he had nothing to do with the costume of a clown. He maybe put a bit of colour on his face for the makeup. That's probably as far as you could accredit to him as what he actually did in the end. He put some funky coloured shapes on his cheeks. Okay, but the costume, completely designed by the son of a Freemason, modelled after the Rakshasa demons of India. You could even find early portraits of Grimaldi wearing the costume, doing a handstand with his head turned up, looking directly at the person. And you can actually find the exact same models in Bali, for example, showing the Rakshasa demons, and it's called an upside down demon, a Kala Sungsang, and it stands in the same position with the same smile on its face, and everything's identical. So even they must have known what they were doing, and they've clearly shown it in the artworks that were produced around that time to show the clown costume. But they never mentioned that because it's not supposed to be known. You're not supposed to know that the most popular character of the entertainment industry of that day, which everyone loved and venerated and wanted to be like, was literally modeled after a demon. They don't want people knowing that. They kept it under wraps.
Yeah.
So let's just quickly summarize the history there. The first proto-clown, Harlequin, modeled after European demons. The proto-clown, which became what we dress as like today, the father of all clowns, Joseph Grimaldi, was dressed up in a costume which we still wear today, what we call a clown, and that was modelled after the demons of India, specifically the Rakshasas, by Freemasons through and through. And then after that, it became the industry standard. They joined circuses, which, by the way, Charles Dibdin created the first Royal Circus. He also created that, modelled after the equestrian shows of Richard Hughes. A famous show rider was just across the road who did horse tricks. But then across the road, he made his own circus and called it a circus. That word had never been used before to describe this type of show, by the way. So he repopularized that word, circus. and he teamed up with Richard Hughes, who was also a famous owner and proprietor of the theatres of Sadler's Wells. So they're all connected. Literally, Freemasons built the first circuses in Britain, which were mainly theatre shows with horse tricks. But the clown would appear when the set would change to entertain the crowd. So they brought the clown with them. That moved to America. Expansionists out west through America meant circuses had to change. Stationary theatres weren't going to do the job because everyone was constantly moving. So they created travelling circuses using railway systems to transport all the equipment and the tents. And this is where you got this is where the big top tent got created. And you'll find one of the people who'd spent a lot of time involved in the later years of his life, kind of perfecting the American circus system, was P.T. Barnum. Phineas Taylor Barnum, who was a member of the Odd Fellows, a very prolific and powerful organization of Freemasonry in America. And he invented the three-ring circus. And it's hardly a coincidence that 3 interlocking rings is literally the logo of the Odd Fellows. So they started to basically create with the circus Freemasonic rituals on a grand scale. All the symbolism from the lodges got injected into American circuses. Through and
through. I've looked. I've dug into Solomon's Temple, extensively.
Yeah.
And the first Barnum and Bailey shows that they did were Solomon and Sheba.
Yep.
And then you get into Solomon, and his downfall was all the demon play and communicating with these underworld entities. So to bring that initially in the very first circuses, along with the ringmaster being the Grandmaster of the Masons.
Yep.
It's all. Yeah, it folds over quite interestingly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So that show, King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, That was actually 10 circuses combined, all run by Freemasons, including the Ringling Bros. And you'll find they always put bros at the end of these early circus troupes, because bro, to be a brother, means to be a member of the fraternity. That's what they're actually talking about. They're all members of the fraternity, you know. And everything about that show was created through Freemason-affiliated companies. So there was the Anderson Arms Company, which created all the backdrops and the clothing for the rituals done in the lodges for Freemasons. They created all the costumes for the King Solomon Queen of Sheba show. You find there was a famous artist who made posters for theatres in Britain. He was hired to create the poster for that as well. And again, it was modeled after rituals that were done specifically in Freemason lodges. Freemasons are obsessed with Solomon. It's all about rebuilding that temple. The temple which was built by demons. You know what I mean? Using the ring. So you have the ring master, who's the orchestrator of the clowns. Well, that's King Solomon, the Lord of the Ring, orchestrating the demons, you know, to build the temple or complete the ritual, shall we say. The top hat worn by the ringmaster is modelled after the leader of a lodge. In any Freemason lodge, the Grand Worshipful Master is the only one allowed to wear a black top hat. So it's literally everything about a circus is just a carboned copy of Freemason rituals done in lodges. That's all it is. There's no different. And the clown is the perfect covert symbol to represent the demons that are channeled in these rituals, and also symbolic of the story of the demons that built Solomon's temple. You know, so yeah, it's all there, and everything about it is through and through. The Freemasons have their hands in it, and as circuses developed throughout the 20th century, you'll find Shriners took over most of them and now control today most of the circuses in America. The Ringling Bros in Sarasota, Florida, are still knocking about. I'll say that. And P.T. Barnum and Bailey and the Ringling Brothers basically all started to join together after Barnum died. So it all became one conglomerate circus anyway in America. But I mean, that's just the American circus. Don't forget these things like this went up north into Quebec as well. And you've got, why am I blanking here? What's it called? The Cirque du Soleil. The Circus of the Sun, you know, and they're wild as well. You should look at any post that they create and the stories and the themes of what they're going on about. They represent the Nephilim all the time, like in far more psychedelic ways than typical circuses. But this is the nefarious thing about what they did there. The general public, the uninitiated, the profane masses, as they call them, would not have had a clue what they were witnessing. They would have thought the circus was just a fun, grand spectacle for the family. A bit of harmless fun for the kids. But that's not at all what it was for. It was not for that, you know. And these initiates coming to go and see these tiny lodge rituals done with insane amount of budget and money on a huge scale, they would have been blown away, you know. But the public would have just thought it was a bit of fun. And circuses are old hat now. You obviously, as technology has developed and the entertainment industry has shifted, not everybody comes to the traveling circus anymore. We have TV instead. You'll find the clowns have transferred over to new medias. So books, film, TV, musicians, any other place they can get them in, they'll get them in. And you'll find the tool of dressing like a clown to channel the Nephilim entities is still used today, even in the music industry. I mean, I've said over and over again, the biggest secret of the music industry, how to make it, is not to be talented. Or to know the right people necessarily. It's simply dress like a psychedelic, red-haired, white-skinned clown monster, and you will be elevated, because the Freemasons who run the industry will choose you just by the virtue of the way you dress, because they want you then looking like that to become an idol. And if you become an idol,
It's like
people will emulate you, and if people emulate the way you dress, then you're dressing like the Nephilim and therefore opening up more channels. And that's all they want to do. That's the point, you know.
The insane clown posse.
Certainly, yeah. I haven't actually made a video. I haven't made a video about them specifically, because a lot of people they have quite a cult following, you know, and a lot of people swear that they're Christian and their message is godly and good. But they're talking about hacking people up with meat cleavers, so I really don't think that's true. I think the people that think that are pretty delusional. And I think it was mainly done for money in the beginning. I think they realised they weren't getting anywhere being the inner city posse, I think it was originally. But as soon as they did the clown thing and got huge clout for it and got big, they stuck with it, and I think it got away from them. I think it's become something far beyond what they originally intended.
Yeah.
I think the cult of the insane clown posse, the Juggalos, I don't even think they
become an egregore.
Yeah, I don't think even they expect it to become what it is. It's got a mind of its own, it's odd. But yes, in a way, if you can, that's the danger of creating these idols that mimic clown features, wide grins, bulbous eyes, all this type of thing, because it does open up channels and gateways, and no one's going to be able to convince me there's any good that can come from doing that. There really isn't. And people want to say, are there good clowns out there? I'm sure there are people with good intentions, but being ignorant of the law doesn't make you immune to the law, unfortunately. If you dress that way, you're opening up a channel. It's actually very serious spiritual warfare stuff, this. If you want to know how it works, you need to understand the importance of what you choose to wear. It's extremely important in this war. Anyway, I've rambled a bit there. Any questions? If you want to take this anywhere else? I think I've given a good overview of the theory, But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, with clowns, Paul, John Wayne Gacy.
Yep, absolutely. The serial killer. I think they say he murdered 33 young men.
33.
What an odd number that is, eh?
Yeah,
absolutely.
A friend of mine down in Rhode Island, he's a goods trader. He goes to fairs and stuff. He actually came across a whole series of Gacy's paintings that he picked up and ended up reselling. Yeah, talk about some creepy stuff, though, huh?
It's interesting, actually.
They got a fortune for them.
Yeah, on Gacy, I've just written a chapter on him in my book, which I plan to make a video about, but I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to say again on you. Maybe I'll put it on Rumble, this video. I don't know, but what I thought was really interesting about that, never mind the fact that at the peak of his murdering is when he decided to start becoming a clown and dressing like a clown. He was a member of the Moose Lodge, which is a Freemason affiliated lodge. He was given a special service pin with an S. He was heavily involved in the politics of the region with the Liberal Party. I think it was the Democrats. I think he was a part of, and he did a lot of stuff for like the lighting of the area, street lamps, and all this type. He was heavily involved in politics, but at the peak of his murders is when he started dressing like Pogo the Clown. Which I find is odd. Is that him dressing like the Nephilim in order to channel them? Or is that merely the Nephilim within him manifesting physically through the costume? It's hard to tell whether the chicken came before the egg with this one. But what is very telling is he seemed to acquire his victims through some kind of human trafficking system of some kind. A conversation was overheard in a restaurant by police who were tracking him. Two young men, and they were talking about this issue of a getting caught situation. And he seems like he was talking to sex traffickers. So some of these young men he murdered were likely purchased by him through some. So he knew people who trafficked humans, is what I'm saying. And funnily enough, where all this happened, see if I can get it up in my book so I can give you exact locations, so I'm not just letting you do the research yourself afterwards. But if I get my book up here and just go straight to John Wayne Gacy's section, I find it because we're talking about the Jesters earlier, weren't we? And what they're affiliated with, and I think they were involved. I actually, looking into it and what I've just researched, I seriously think that's where he got the inspiration to dress like a clown from as well. Because he was associating with these human trafficking cults from the Royal Order of the Jesters. So if I go to John Wayne Gacy here, he was a member of the local Loyal Order of the Moose Lodge, which is an offshoot of Freemasonry, which obviously makes his number of victims being 33 the highest level of the fraternity. Very, very, very odd. He entered local Democratic Party politics, offering the use of his employees to clean the party's headquarters at no charge. And he was rewarded with the title of precinct captain for the township street lighting committee. Then in 1975 to 1978, the same years he began performing as a clown, he was appointed the director of Chicago's annual Polish Constitution Day Parade, which is so odd. He met and was photographed with the First Lady, Rosalind Carter, wearing an S pin indicating a person given special clearance by the United States Secret Service. All very suspect. So he was involved with extremely high level people in American politics. And who are the members of the Royal Order of Jesters? It's the highest level members of the American politics. You know, a lot of the jesters that got caught were Supreme Court judges, all sorts of things. You know, so anyway. It seems like he got cocky and callous as he was allowed himself to be witness with his last victim, which was Robert Peist. On the clue, and after obtaining a search warrant, the police discovered the bodies of 29 boys and young men in or near Gacy's house. 4 of the bodies were found by the Des Plaines River. Now, apparently the house had been stinking for ages, and all sorts of horrible stuff was going on. He tried to do a plea of innocence by insanity, apparently, but everyone who diagnosed him says, nope, he was actually very well aware of what he was doing and not insane at all, of all 33 murders. If I can find here, at the end, my closing thoughts. So, if his involvement with the fraternity wasn't so spiritual in nature, his membership may have helped him connect with shady underground networks of like-minded perverts to acquire young boys to torture and murder. Though this is wild speculation on my part, knowing the Royal Order of the Jesters were embroiled in their own sex trafficking scandals, possibly involving underage children, and the nearest lodge, number 48, is only a 1-hour drive from the murderer's home, the headquarters being only a 3-hour drive, southeast Indianapolis, you have to wonder if it was connected. So this guy was only an hour away from his local Jester Lodge and only a 3-hour drive away from the Indianapolis headquarters of the Royal Order of the Jesters. I reckon he was connecting with them. I reckon that's where he got a few of his victims from. I think, and that's probably why he dressed like a clown. I think he was inspired.
Yeah.
I think he was inspired. Yeah.
So now with the old Nephilim, right? You would have the blonde-haired, the black-haired, and the red-haired. The red-haired were specifically, I believe, called the Horim giants. And when you trace that back, I mean, even going back as far as like Noah, when Noah was born, he was said to be, white as snow, and his hair was, red as, and his eyes glowed. So you have this I was going to say we should go back and try to cover some of the pre-biblical kind of Nephilim kind of lines, maybe.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Like you said, unfortunately, the mainstream canon of the Bible doesn't give us much in terms of description of the Nephilim. In terms,
right.
It really talks about what they did rather than what they looked like, more so. What we can know is they were giants. What we can know is they were fierce warriors. We can know that they had 6 fingers and 6 toes, and 2 rows of teeth. We can know that from biblical descriptions. Then you have to really start going outside of that to maybe extra biblical, pseudepigraphical, apocryphal texts to try and get a broader picture, trying to keep it biblically grounded. And then after that, you have to go into external cultures that aren't within the biblical canon and look at other cultures' representations of the same creatures. Right. And that's where you can really start to get the overall image of what we're dealing with. So I go through all 3 of those, external biblical, extra biblical, and pure biblical understandings, and we can infer what they looked like from, like you said, what the seraphim are described to look like, who were, I believe, the parents of these creatures, the dragons. Okay, the fiery flying serpents, the seraph, were literally dragons by any stretch of the imagination. They had the feathered serpents of Quetzalcoatl, for example, is a good example. The rainbow serpents of Australia are another good example. All the dragons of Chinese culture, I believe these are the seraphim. And they have big, wide, grin mouths with multicolored fractal patterns, feathers all over them. They were wild, psychedelic creatures, And I think they were shapeshifters. I think they could take human form-ish if you wanted to. They're described in the Bible as being the closest to God, his closest confidants. They're the ones who sing "Holy, Holy, Holy" around the throne of God and have 6 wings, 2 to fly, 4 to cover up their bodies, so they can withstand the glory of God. So they come in many wild forms. But I believe it was his most trusted angels that were sent as the Watchers, which were the seraphim. I do believe that. So we can know from the descriptions of the seraphim that their offspring would have been pretty monstrous and psychedelic looking, serpentine in nature. And then if you go outside to, like I said, extra biblical canon, there is the description of Noah, as you described, and I think his father, was it Methuselah? Was it Lamech? Yeah. Anyway, he went to his father and was screaming like, I think I've just given birth. That's wife's just given birth to a Nephilim. This guy looks insane. He's like
right.
he's pale. His eyes are glowing. His hair is golden. He's radiating the whole room. He's got like red and white skin. It looks insane. I think he looks like one of the sons of God. He looks like one of the children of the sons of God, the Nephilim. You know, he was scared of that. Now, Noah wasn't a Nephilim. Noah was a divine, chosen, set-apart human being sent by God to repopulate the earth after the flood. He was special. He was divine in nature, yes, because he was God appointed, but he wasn't a Nephilim. But from that description, it was scary enough to make his father think his wife had given birth to a Nephilim. So we can use that as an indicator of what the Nephilim may have looked like. The glowing ones, as Gary Wayne talks about them quite a lot. They had large glowing eyes, perhaps golden hair with a very ruddy red and white paleness to them. The skin was very, very, very white. If we go to the descriptions of the lineage of Cain, in the book of Lamech of Cain and Leviathan, this is the story of one of Cain's descendants, Lamech. So not the Lamech on Seth's side, but the Lamech on Cain's side, going on a quest to discover how Cain managed to populate the earth after he left the Garden of Eden. Now that goes into Gary Wayne's theory that there were actually more people around, but that's neither here nor there right now.
Pre-Adamites.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there right now, but what's interesting in that book is that the mark of Cain, which lasted for 8 generations, was deathly vampiric leprous white skin. So clowns are known for chalk painting themselves up with grease paint and be as white as possible. It's likely the Nephilim had that white, pale-skinned feature, perhaps from their mothers, who were the daughters of Cain, who had extremely pale white skin. Mix that with a multicolored fractal pattern, fiery flying, wide-grinned, tooth-bulging-eyed serpent monster, and you're going to get something that looks like a crazy-looking clown demon. And I think that's where... So we can infer from those biblical contexts that, yes, that's probably what they actually look like. And we can create a holistic image by combining together all these clues. A lot of people always depict the Nephilim as just looking like really hench Conan the Barbarian, huge pectoral muscle human people with brown hair wearing a loincloth or something. That's such a boring rendition of what they actually... They didn't look human at all. They looked insane. Even Flavius Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, he's describing when he's writing about it. Just down the road is a museum with the skeletons of the giants on display, and he's saying
the 2 rows of teeth.
And he's saying their countenance is terrifying. They look nothing like a human skeleton. Okay, they look nuts, right? Even just the skeletons look terrifyingly unhuman and odd. Odd, you know, is the only word to describe it. So these renditions of giants looking like just really big men with loads of muscle is way off base. They looked like clowns, you know, and we can then go and look at other cultures who depicted their encounters with these demons. Many cultures called them their gods. Many cultures call them their ancestors today. Many other cultures call them their enemies and fought against them in many ways. But you can look at all the ancient representations of these half-human, half-serpent hybrids, and they all look the same. Big, wide grin, tongue sticking out, sharp, jagged serpent fangs, with pale white skin and wild red hair. It's the same no matter where you go. And I think I've done a good job on my channel, if you go look at my videos, showing this clear as day. You know, they all encountered the exact same creature. They just gave them different names and had their own artistic, cultural style of depicting them. But the aesthetics are identical. They're identical, you know, and you can't ignore a common narrative like that. All these cultures must have experienced the same thing to come up with the same image across vast distances like that, separated by vast oceans. You know, it's uncanny how identical they are. And like I said, yeah, I think that's the biblical foundation for what they look like. It's pretty clear when you actually just start scratching below the surface. But they had this is the thing as well. You have to understand. They weren't honking, juggling, red nose wearing clowns on unicycles. Okay, that is a caricature that we have created in the more modern times to represent them. It's an amalgam image. They didn't look like circus clowns exactly, okay? They looked like hybrid reptilian human creatures, which
Right.
is something similar or akin to what we call a clown today. And just like you look at any reptile, there's many variations on what a reptile can be. You know, an iguana is different from a
Oh
snake.
yeah.
You know, they're not exactly the same thing. And I think the Nephilim had wild variations of skin color patterns and shapes and forms, just like the reptile kingdom does today. You know, I
Right.
think, and I think there may be precedents to say that it wasn't all just simply um, reptilian in nature. I think something like insectoid type angels may have mated with humans,
Mm,
which also
mm,
are extremely colourful psychedelic creatures in their own right and alien looking. I think fish type gods and fallen angels in rebellion, Watcher class, also mated with human women to create Nephilim offspring, which are also very colourful and
mm.
psychedelic in nature. You know,
The Dogon.
the Dogons, exactly, you know, and the African tribe who dealt with them and communicated them. They say they got their knowledge from these fish gods,
Right.
these fish hybrids, and told them all about the star systems they should know nothing about, you know.
Yeah.
And
Well,
but you look at the way they dress. They dress with stilts, and they have pink frills all over their costumes with black and white fractal pattern lines. You
mm,
know, and that's like a clown today. They even wear the stilts like clowns do in the circus. They wouldn't even look out of place if you took one of these Dogon ritual people in their full garb and put them in the middle of Cirque du Soleil. You wouldn't even recognize that they were out of place in any way, shape, or form. They look like they fit right into the show, you know.
I did.
And so yeah, there you go. I think that was my biblical foundation for it. But I've wrote it
What
all
ne-
down in the book anyway.
any links with like the Veracocha or the Veracocha?
Uh, that name's ringing a bell. Remind me.
That
Give
would
me.
be South America, where he came in riding on a boat of serpents, and he was all in white with 6 fingers and 6 toes, and basically taught them all rebuilding after the deluge.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I've
Mm,
not actually heard
mm,
that one before, surprisingly, but what I do know about South America is um, the Selknam tribe, way down south, for example. They are very ancient, very ancient peoples. They got genocided pretty hard actually during the colonization. But the way they dress is extremely serpent-like and psychedelic in their rituals, with black and white fractal patterns, pointed cone heads, very weird. So if you
mm.
look up the Selknam tribe, they're a good example as well of the same ancestor spirit culture worship. But there's definitely stories and tales that, you know, when the flood happened, which I believe was a mercy, by the way, because like I said,
Yeah,
all humans were utterly corrupting everything. There would have been nothing left if there wasn't a flood. We literally wouldn't even be alive today. There would just be it would be a hellish, nightmarish realm to exist in with nothing of God here anymore. You know, as ordained and as it should be. But if you understand, there's actually plenty of survival stories of Nephilim making it to the other side. Now, whether
mm,
that would more likely be the Eliud and the Elio perhaps surviving. And Gary Wayne's
Yeah.
theorized that a lot of them actually survived by going into pocket dimensions while the flood happened.
mm,
The Watchers who didn't have sex with human women, who weren't locked in chains but were in rebellion, I think they went to those offspring and said, "Quickly, jump in this portal. I've created a pocket dimension for you to ride the flood out in." And you hear
mm.
stories of Bigfoot manifesting into our realm, then suddenly disappearing again
Disappearing. Yeah.
through tree portals. I believe those pocket dimensions probably still exist, and I think that's where you get things like Valhalla from,
Mm,
where the mighty warriors get to go in death. You know, who died during valor and all, because these were mighty warriors at the end of the day. I don't think a lot of these religions. I don't think they were meant for humans. I think they're Nephilim religions. Because it seems like the fate of a Nephilim creature, if he dies on Earth, he's stuck on Earth in spirit form.
right. Right.
So to avoid that, they like to chill out in these other dimensions where they don't have to manifest physically in the physical world often, because
Mm,
they run the danger of dying on Earth if they get
right.
caught and then getting stuck on Earth in spirit form. I thought that was a fantastic. Gary Wayne helped me put that idea together, but there's high precedence for this. The fairy dolmens, for example, all over Europe, you know, these portals to the spirit realm where the fairies reside, the Tuatha De Danann, and there's just too
Mm,
many examples of these portals all over the earth to get to the spirit realms where these odd creatures reside, and I think that's how a lot of them did survive the flood. And obviously Noah survived by in an ark, literally on earth. He survived the hardships by the mercy and miracle of God and his ordained control, you know. But I think there are also stories of some Nephilim creatures which weren't have been these are not the original Nephilim, remember, because they all died in a war maybe 200 years before the flood. So these are humans who have hybridized themselves, which God sent a flood to basically wipe out. I think some of them, by the skin of their teeth, made it to the other side. Only because,
right, like King Og.
yeah, but I would only say that because there's evidences for this in other cultures. So the biggest one I found, which is a huge smoking gun, is the Ecuadorian people, the Canary peoples of Ecuador. They have this odd myth about a flood that came, and two brothers managed to survive the flood by climbing to the peak of the local mountain. Now, first of all, climbing a mountain is not easy, and you can't do it quickly either.
Oh.
So these two men must not have been human. They must have had something done to themselves to give them superhuman abilities to climb to the peak of a mountain during a deluge. Okay, so that's first of all, that raises huge red flags. And if you trust the Bible at its word, all flesh was corrupted, then these weren't humans. They couldn't have been humans. They were people who had Nephilimified themselves. They had mutated themselves somehow to have
become a Gaborum.
Yes, exactly. And these two brothers made it to the top of this mountain. And then once the flood came down, so they survived a long time up there. How do you do that without food or water? They weren't human. They had some kind of weird hardiness to them. Human beings do not have to, in order for that to even have a shred of evidence or truth behind it. Let's assume that it is a true story, you know. To explain that, they must have had powers. They must have done something to themselves. They must have been corrupted humans. And then the story gets even odder. They then climb down the mountain and find a cave. And in that cave, there's food. So they eat the food, and then they go back down to the bottom. They go back up to the cave again, and they find more food in there, and something's leaving food for them. And eventually they discover it's these two flying hybrid bird women. Okay? Harpies, exactly. Sirens, okay? These two hybridized women who had also corrupted their own DNA. These were the part of the Nephilimifying themselves people, okay? Possibly even women who mated with fallen watchers, because it said in the book of Enoch, the women who mated with the watchers became sirens. Now, we don't know if that was a punishment by God or a gift by the watchers to make them more powerful. It's not made clear, but my working theory is in order to survive the birthing process of giving birth to a Nephilim, the women had to be changed. So they became half serpent, half human women in order to lay eggs to give birth to the Nephilim instead of having to birth them naturally like humans do. Because the human women the human women who gave birth to Nephilim, they burst open in true alien fashion. Okay, they didn't survive the process. But I think in order to make the women capable of surviving the process of being impregnated and giving birth to a giant, they had to be turned into sirens. So it's possible these two bird women of Ecuador were sirens, or just human women who had corrupted their DNA. It doesn't matter. Anyway, these two brothers raped grapes of them. And it said that they repopulated that entire area of Ecuador after the flood. So you have a story of corrupted hybridized humans repopulating an entire locale of the earth after a flood. You know, you can't discount that when we have the story of the deluge of Noah and the reasonings behind it and the history of the corruption of the deer. It fits in too perfectly to the narrative. And it's little things like this that make me constantly reaffirm my faith that the biblical history narrative is the right narrative of humanity. That is our story. And the whole conspiracy, the only reason we have a conspiracy is to obfuscate and hide these facts and this truth, because it all points in the end to God and then inevitably to his son Jesus. So,
and I think overall, when you look at the Bible, the reason it was written and propagated was because of this specific culture that was occurring in Samaria with the cannibals and the drinking of the blood and all the different gods that were eating their children, and you know.
Oh yeah. People, just because the Nephilim physically died doesn't mean people stopped sacrificing their children to them. because
Right.
contracts can be made still, even though they're in the spiritual realm. They're still here on Earth and can interact with humans. And the way you do it is you open up a channel, and you can either dress like them to open up a channel, and then they can possess the person who's dressing like them, and then the tribe can then communicate with the person, the shaman, shall we call it, who's channeling the demon, and they can ask it questions, get power or knowledge from it,
Right.
or
Prophecy.
or the possessed can get power themselves, the inability to bleed, to withstand being stabbed, to withstand heat. Powers, there's many reasons why people do this, and they gain stuff from it. A bountiful harvest is just one simplistic thing, but the whole point of venerating and sacrificing these ancestors is to gain stuff from them. It's a transactional thing, anything but
Right,
God at the end of the day. And that's why it's done. But I think there's a sick, twisted game being played by these demons at the end of the day. I think they just want to see somebody do the most heinous of horrible things to children and kill them, because they know that person does not know God.
Right.
Seems that way.
So it makes them safe. They're safe with that person. I can reveal myself to them because they just butchered a child in front of me. I know there's no Jesus in them. I know there's no God in them. So I will manifest. So that's what satanic rituals are for. That's why they're so horrible. It's proof that you're on their side. You're cool with the demon. You get what I mean? And that's why these satanic rituals are so heinous. It doesn't matter how they do the ritual. It doesn't matter what sigil they draw or what incantation they say or what chant or mantra or whatever. It really doesn't matter. They just want to see you sacrifice a human or something in front of them to prove that Jesus is not here. Because that's the weapon you have against these things now. When Jesus came, it wasn't simply just obviously to give us our salvation, to forgive us of all of our sins, all the important stuff, which obviously we can take as a free gift. But it was also to give us authority over the demons, as he had, casting them out of people, and in his name, through his authority, we have the power to trample on serpents, to destroy these beasts. And that's the point today. That's why it has to be a cult. That's why the clown costume has to be hidden. They have to do it through covert means, especially in the West, because we're a highly Christianized region of the earth where the demons have to be more subtle. So they do it through things like the clown, which seems so stupid to us, but that's how they do it. That's the trick. It's the true magician's secret. We're not supposed to know the trick, we're not supposed to know we're being tricked. That's how it works. But if you go to these other cultures south of the equator, primarily, who aren't as Christianized or have more heathen, paganistic cultures, or occultic, let's say Gnostic cultures, or sun worship cultures, nature worship cultures, wherever it is, the demons are out in the open there. They're not even hiding. They don't have to hide because they know there's very few people around them who have the ability to cast them out or get rid of them. So that it's free reign down there. Everyone knows you dress like things to channel spirits. But in the West, do we know that? That's what we're doing when we dress like a clown? No, we don't. And that's the game. That's the game we're up against. Sorry, I went off on one there. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say that, you go back in the old text and it's basically like these entities are given dominion over the earthly realm, just like we are given dominion over the earthly realm. So there's almost a competition, of the earthly realm, between us and them.
Oh, yeah. Well, they would love to be our kings and rulers physically again. I think there are agendas at play today to make that a reality. I think they're trying to find a way to get back here. They want a body. They are desperate for a body. They are. Think about this. You used to be a god king worshipped by humans who could satiate any lust you wanted at any moment. You were invincible, immortal, ridiculous, And then suddenly you're now this disembodied, ambiguous, hive mind, weird legion monster thing stuck in the plumbing of the universe with no ability to experience anything of pleasure anymore because you don't even have fingers or nerves. You're in the realm of disembodied forms. They are in hell. They hunger and thirst and have no means to quench that hunger or thirst. And that's what the hungry ghosts of like Japan, for example, where people leave out food for them. That's what they're really doing. They're feeding these beasts, these monsters who are bodiless with all these lusts. So that's what possession's all about. That's why they want more channels. If you let them into your body, they will experience what you partake in. They will experience through your senses the lusts and pleasures they will make you perform through possession. They will influence you subtly to make you smoke that cigarette, drink that drink, have sex with that person, or whatever the lust is, whatever thing they want to satisfy, sniff that line of cocaine, take that psychedelic, or I don't know, murder that person. That's what the whole point of demonic possession is. It's to influence you to do these things because the demon within you wants to feel again. They want to feel what it's like to do those things they used to be able to do. Okay? That's what possession's for. But possession is not optimal because at any moment you can discover that they're there, and in the authority of Jesus Christ you can cast them out, and they hate that. That's their problem. Okay, so what they need to do is find a workaround for this issue of Jesus in their eyes. Okay, they need to find how can I come back to earth without having to worry about being kicked back out again and going back to the dry places as described, that place where I'm in pain constantly and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Well, what if we created a robotic body with a human-like mind? What if we merged transhumanist robotics with AI minds and created the perfect, indestructible, godlike vessel to experience things through once more? Could they not just easily just possess that rather than a human? And who's going to cast it? Who's going to cast it out of that thing? It's. I think there's agendas at play to bring them back, and there's certainly
now.
Yeah.
Have you seen it's a carbon nanofiber that they're using for bodily repairs and stuff, but the way that the carbon nanofiber lines up is it actually creates that alchemical, the Star of David, essentially. And I've heard some people speculating, well, and that's the whole thing. How far do you go down the line of certain bloodlines being more apt to be able to participate with these energies, like blue bloods,
Well, I try not to dwell too much. I try not to focus too much on the bloodline thing. Now, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I know there are people out there who do claim to have literal descended blood from the Nephilim. They do exist, and they claim such things. But I don't want to encourage people to go out there and start pointing fingers, accusing people of being hidden Nephilim descendants.
I know that's the danger.
You're crossing an extremely dangerous line there, where who knows what something stupid someone might do, thinking they're attacking.
That's how I feel about it as well.
But I think that's the whole point of why we're all kind of in need of a savior, and the Bible talks about the wheat and the tares. Okay.
Yes.
And it says at the end, in the final end, at the great white throne judgment, it's him during the harvest who will separate the wheat from the tares. But until that moment, you actually can't tell the difference.
Right.
That's the issue. It's not for us to determine who is and isn't a true human, shall we say, who is a tare and who isn't. It's for them to do.
Not.
It's for God to do with the final judgment and the final harvest. It's not for us, and that's why I don't like to play that game, because I don't want people to think I'm trying to encourage genocide or something stupid like that, And I've had people try and say that that's the case by simply just saying that the Nephilim aren't men, but they're actually hybrid creatures. So, because a lot of people think, oh, the Nephilim are just sons of Seth, who had sex with the daughters of Cain. So they created really bad humans. But as far as I'm aware, two humans having sex with each other doesn't create monstrous giants. There's no evidence for that. So, but people who would claim that and follow that mainstream narrative would say someone like me, who's claiming they're not even human at all, is just trying to justify the genocide of non-humans or something like that, some kind of eugenics stuff. That's not what I'm coming from. I don't think at all we should be pointing fingers and trying to say who is and isn't the right bloodline. But I've seen all the work about RH negative and O bloodlines being the oldest blood, O negative, and then these other newer iterations of bloods only appearing over the past centuries, like AB and all these type of things. And there's the rhesus factor. So don't get me wrong, I'm fully aware of it all. I am, and it's something I can only keep in my repertoire of interesting information, but what can I do with that information? Very little without crossing some extremely bizarre ethical boundaries which should not be crossed. I take the wheat and the tares analogy, that leave that to God in the end. You know, and in our own time, just deny evil when it represents itself to you. Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. At the end of the day,
Doves, yep.
If someone's being a narcissistic demon around you, then you should probably look at them and say, "Yeah, I'm going to stay away from that guy, and I'm going to rebuke him every time they try and do anything evil or stupid." And obviously, I'll try and hinder their plans as much as possible. But are they a descendant of the Nephilim? Who can know something like that? I mean, humans alone have the capacity for evil. You don't have to be a hybrid creature for that, you know. So
after all these years, aren't we all kind of descendants of the Nephilim?
Well, you could argue that, but you could argue that it's so ingrained throughout the millennia now that maybe we all have that corruption in us in some way.
Right.
Maybe that's what the true call for being born again in a new body really is.
Mm-hmm.
Why there needs to be a new heaven and earth. Why we need to be. You know, everything needs putting in the lake of fire, and everything needs to start again in the end, because it truly is all corrupted, you know. And now it's not really about our flesh bodies, though. It's about the soul. It's about the spirit. It's about the Holy Spirit and whether or not you're connected to God. It's not about how corrupt your body is with Nephilim stuff. You know, it's
great answer.
Yeah, that's it, really.
I mean, when you're going on to blue bloods, you've also got RH0, which are gold bloods, which is even rarer, and it seems to be high amongst Australian Aboriginal groups.
Yeah, well, there's they say ichor in Greek mythology is golden. The blood of the gods was golden. They called it ichor, didn't they?
Right.
So it's the ichor is what they called it, and the gods bled gold. And it said what was his name? Was it Prometheus? He, as punishment for giving knowledge to the people, he had to have his liver pecked out by a crow for eternity. For eternity. It kept growing back, and every morning it would happen again. But it says his ichor, the blood that dripped below him, like it flourished with like life and flowers or something, or created like, I can't remember the myth. It probably varies with each myth, but it was life-giving blood. You know what I mean? It had magical properties to it, and immortality and all sorts of things. You know, and I think that's a part of the mythos. But yeah, the whole gold blood thing. There's ancient precedents for that, and I'm not surprised there's modern precedents for it either. Isn't it plasma or something? Don't people harvest something gold from people's blood? I heard that
plasma is necessary in the medical industry for everything.
Yeah, I heard it in recent. Just after I made my video on the ichor, there was suddenly this popularization. I think a whistleblower was going around saying there's this golden substance you can extract from humans, which they use to stay youthful, and the elites use to like maintain vitality and life and youth or something like that they take from us. Yeah, what was it called? It's not adrenochrome. It's not adrenochrome. No, it's something else. It's like another. Someone in the chat, let me know what that was. It was like popular like 3 months ago. It became a thing. It had that stint in the conspiracy culture where everyone was talking about it for like a week, and then everyone forgets about it. You know.
Right.
But what was it called? That'll come back to me. But that did happen, and that is a thing. Yeah. So there's something about. Well, even the Bible says the life is in the blood. You know, when Abel was murdered by Cain, God said, I can hear Abel's blood screaming at me through the ground. You know, it's
calling out.
Yeah, it's there. You know, and this is the whole idea. You know, don't drink the lifeblood, and don't do it. You know, and I think that's why
that's the noetic code as far as ending the drinking of blood. Period was the Noahide code.
Oh, absolutely, and you know, I think we don't really understand the spiritual ramifications of doing such a thing. You get vampires from these pale-skinned, vampiric, bloodthirsty creatures who were immortal, you know, and had odd abilities that are beyond our perceptions and understanding. You know, the ability to put people into trances, and the ability, you know, you have to be invited in, some weird spiritual code behind it all, and they can fly. And I think the Nephilim had weird psychic abilities. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting also with King Charles claiming his lineage back to Vlad the Impaler, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, mate.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, I think we're getting close to the end here, but
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we're getting close to the end here, but I was one of the things I found interesting that I heard you mention on another show was the idea of the clown car.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So symbolically speaking, like I said, everything in a circus is a reference to a tongue-in-cheek comedic reference to Nephilim-esque features. So the clown car is an interesting one. I only know this because I've done some research in the past into what the symbol of a car can mean within dreams. I already kind of knew this, so it wasn't hard for me to quickly piece together what they were doing there. But it generally speaking, this isn't getting all fancy about, a car means you're going to get good luck and get rich. I hate those type of dream interpretations. They're so stupid. Good luck coming your way. Be careful of evil people because you dreamt of, I don't know, a spider or something. I think when it comes to the subconscious mind and symbolism, I think a vehicle is a literal representation of your body. It's your way of getting around the world in existence. And I dreamt that my car broke down years ago. And when I looked into it, it says you're likely going through something like an illness currently. And I was actually. I was severely ill at that time when I had that dream, and I wasn't able to do anything as a result of it. And I dreamt that my car had broken down, so my body wasn't working, which is what the car represented. So I kind of knew that. I already understood that as a symbol. And I think when you see a tiny car with multiple clowns coming out of it, well, they're, first of all, giants coming out of a car. So obviously tiny car, big people by comparison. That's a direct reference to the clowns being representations of ancient giants, first of all. But if the car represents the body and multiple Nephilim are coming out of the body, then what you've got there is a direct reference to Legion possessing a human body, which is what, demonically speaking, in the Bible, that's what happens. People get possessed by numerous demons, and they are legion. There's many. So the clown car literally represents people being possessed by the Nephilim spirits. That's literally what it represents in a joking manner. But everything about a clown, when you actually start breaking it down, especially the more modern ones, is a direct reference to Nephilim features. So maybe it might be good to talk about this before we end it, just to round it all off. But if we just start with the face, for example. So first of all, white skin, red hair is the base of any clown. That's also the basic descriptor of most Nephilim creatures. Even in the North Americas, you've got the Paiute Indians who dealt with white-skinned, red-haired, big grinning cannibalistic giants, and they said they put them into Lovelock Cave, blocked up the cave, and set fire to the entrance and killed them that way. So they were warring with these tribes forever. I mean, even the Duwamish tribes of North America talk about dealing with a group called the Nung Nungs. And the Nung Nungs were basically white-skinned, red-haired, wide-grinned, cannibalistic giants who would play cruel jokes on the people. They had some weird cream that could make them invisible, which is really odd. And this tribe decimated the Duwamish people, ripped all the heads off the young braves, threw the bodies into the air and let them just splatter down on the floor around all the women and the children, They just threw them above the tree canopies because they dared stand up to them and say, stop making fun of us and stop stealing our women. But the description is always the same: white skin, red hair. So that's a clown. That's a basic clown. Okay. So there's your basic Nephilim reference, first of all, from even modern references to ancient references. And then you look at the mouth. They have a big, wide smile grin painted on in some way. Now, first of all, that's a reptilian feature. A snake can dislocate its jaw to eat its prey. A wide serpentine grin is what you're looking at there when you see a wide, unnatural grin on a clown. It's a direct serpentine reference. The red around the mouth of a clown, the red paint, first of all, can represent human lips, which would have looked very odd on a reptilian creature, but that's what they would have been. So they would have big, wide, pink, plush lips, probably, because by virtue of their human nature, mixed with reptilian, odd, scaly features, it would look very strange and odd and uncanny to look at. But it could also be a tongue-in-cheek reference to the fact that they were cannibals, and they had blood smeared around their mouth at all times. And that's why the nose may have been dipped in blood as well, which is why the nose may have been red. A more likely reason for the red nose is that, funnily enough, a condition of having extremely pale skin is extreme rosacea. And in extreme forms of rosacea, they call it terminal end-stage rosacea is what they call it, end-stage rosacea, but we call it today in the medical industry a rhinophyma. And our rhinophyma is when rosacea gets so out of hand, the nose starts to grow into a big, red, bulbous, pus-filled, painful thing. It looks just like a clown nose. And it's specifically pale people who primarily suffer from this. Not always. You get the odd outlier of other races suffering from this, but it's primarily comes under the umbrella of something called the Curse of the Celts. It's a white Northern European issue, and I think it has something to do with probably the amount of melanin you have in your skin, and I think the Nephilim were the palest of the pale. So it wouldn't surprise me if they also developed this odd genetic condition where their noses, as they got older, began to grow into big red bulbous balls. Even humans today suffer from the same disease, and it's primarily pale people who get it, so it's there.
Right.
Yeah, and so also the multicolored polka dots, patterns on the face, things like that, similar again to extreme versions of blotchy red skin from rosacea, which I believe the Nephilim also would have had as well. And the crosses on the eyes of clowns, so sometimes you'll see a one line slit going down each eye. That's actually a predator trait. So predators tend to have slit pupils going vertical. And that's so they can get a better view on a horizontal plane of the distance between themselves and the prey at the expense of peripheral vision. So they become hyper-focused hunters. Usually animals with slit pupils like that have the eyes at the front of the head for that hyper-focused view. But you find it's not just reptiles, it's also foxes, some canids like coyotes and foxes, and then some cats as well get it, and large cats and felines. And one species of bird has it as well. It's really odd. I can't remember the name of that bird right now, but look it up and you'll find it pretty quickly. They also have an odd shaped beak as well. Very very specific for picking up fish out of the water. Precise hunters they are, these types of birds. So to have a predator symbol literally painted onto the face of a clown, again, should make you raise your eyebrows. But speaking of raised eyebrows, having an extremely high brow ridge painted onto a clown's face is another reference to making them look like they have, first of all, an elongated forehead. Another common feature in the skulls found of the Nephilim, they have elongated foreheads, and that makeup trait tends to accentuate the elongated skull cap they wear, the bald skull cap on top, pinheads type of look. And that's what the high
skull binding.
Well, that would be an attempt by tribes to emulate
Right.
their gods as a beauty standard. Skull boarding, skull binding, but the Nephilim skulls, they didn't need to do that. They just had heads like that, But yeah, so the high brow ridge can be that, but also you find a lot of clowns shade in that entire eyebrow ridge all the way down to the pupil of their eyes in like blue. And you'll realize when the actor closes their eyes with that makeup on, it looks like they have enormous glowing blue eyes, which again is a Nephilim trait, large glowing bulbous eyes. So all the makeup.
Also,
go ahead.
in Samaria, the priests of Baal, when they were participating in the ritual of eating human flesh, they would paint blue rings around their eyes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're trying to emulate something. They're trying to copy something. They're trying to be like something they considered powerful and great. Pure emulation, pure worship and veneration. They're trying to copy the Nephilim. But there's plenty of statues around from even Egypt, but all across the world that show these odd creatures with big, huge blue pupiled eyes. Like unnaturally large blue eyes. So I do believe the clowns have included that in their trait as well with their makeup. So getting down from the makeup down to the neck, they have a ruffle around their neck, which is primarily that's to copy the fashion of the Elizabethan age, when starch began to be added to fabrics to make things hard. They had these big, huge They're these big circular discs around their neck, and the bigger the disc, the more rich you were, type of thing, And the clowns adopted it as a joke because Pedrolino from the Commedia dell'arte was modelled after an Elizabethan servant. So you could argue that, fair enough. But it's funny that it's also a strictly reptilian trait to have a frill around the neck. And you'll find the dragons, the dragon lizards of Australia, or the frilled lizards, it looks identical to one of those, and I do think perhaps the Nephilim may have developed frills around the neck too, very similar to some of the dragons and reptilians we see today, even today, I think they would have probably had that feature. So to have a reptilian feature like a frill around the neck associated with the clown, perhaps it's not as innocuous as we think, Then you get the costume, psychedelic coloured patterns, that serpent skin. That's quite simple, really, it's an easy one. large gloves to accentuate that they were giants with big hands, silly big shoes, big red shoes, to symbolize that they were giants with very large feet, wearing tiny hats with tiny umbrellas to make the person look like a giant in comparison to the things they had, wearing stilts to make them giants, it's all just tongue-in-cheek references from then on to giant features. But it's funnily enough, there's actually the Heyoka tribes of America,
The Navajo.
yeah, I believe it's the Navajo. Yeah, they have the
Yeah,
Heyoka
the
cheated.
Heyoka.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, they're clowns. The people who dress like that with the black and white fractal patterns and the silly hats with the two antennas, they wear big long red shoes.
Right.
Just
I
like
have a
a
friend that's a Heyoka clown in the Navajo.
Yeah, but well, it's interesting that
Oh.
they, funnily enough, actually wear the same big long red shoes that modern Western clowns wear, and it's highly likely the Freemasons stole that from the Heyoka and added it to their clown when making their image. They took that trait from their
Right.
clown culture's representations, the shamans.
The Heyoka, yeah, they walk backwards in everything they do,
Yeah.
to make the rest of the tribe question if they're doing things appropriately.
Yeah, but they're called clown societies. That's what Western anthropology calls these cultures that do these things. And generally speaking, the clown character within these shamanistic cultures is actually a high priest. They're actually considered extremely important and of high venerative value because they are actually channeling the spirit of the Heyoka at that point, who's actually a thunder god, not simply just a clown. And you'll find a lot of Nephilim have been associated with controlling lightning and thunder and the rain all across cultures. It's odd. So yeah.
Well, and I was going to ask about the slapstick within theater performances. Would that be in the line of the lightning, and the shocking aspect of the mystery?
But perhaps it's a wand of sorts. I think it's primarily modelled after the caduceus of Dionysus. Sorry, the Thyrsus of Dionysus or the caduceus of Hermes, but also the club carried by the wild man of Europe. Harlequin had this stick, this club, which was called the slapstick. And
but just the noise it would make in regard to shocking the
audience.
audience.
like a thunder stick. And what he would do,
Right.
he would slap the stick on the ground. It would make this huge, loud cracking noise, and then the scene would change. There would be a huge scene change, and the whole stage would transform into a brand new scene. And it's almost as though he had the magical powers to change reality. Because don't forget, the early Harlequin, modelled after the demons of Europe, was a demon who had magical powers. That's the point of his character. So he used his wand, his slapstick, to whack the ground, and with a loud crack, everything changed. So perhaps, but historically speaking, that's where the slapstick does come from. But perhaps the loud cracking noise associated with it would have been, because it was like two pieces of sticks put together to make a loud crack. It would have it would have whipped together, you know what I mean, when he whipped it down. So yeah, there's definitely precedence for what you're saying there. Most of the time, I mean, in Romania they have a thing called the Solomonari, and the Solomonars are kind of like high priests who it says they go to a devil's school to get trained to be a Solomonar, and they actually become the students of the devil, is what it says by the Romanians. And they tend to have really pale skin and red hair. It says when they're born, they're chosen to go to the special wizard school for the devil because they have a strange membrane surrounding them. So they're not human. They have some
veil.
Yeah, they have some odd membrane around them, which isn't of a human nature. So they have the right blood in them to go and be compatible to be a part of Satan's army. And it says once they graduate, they learn how to ride dragons and control the weather, including thunder and lightning.
The Rain Man.
Yeah. So but that's a European culture, and you find it's, like I said, the Heyoka, which copied this thunder god, is identical. It's the same thing. So it's odd, isn't it? But yeah, even in the Wangina of, for example, in Australia, which are the literal clown. I'm not even joking. You must have seen the Wangina in some of my other shows, but they look like clowns. It's not even like they are a clown, like through and through. Just look at a Wangina and it's undeniable. They are clowns. They look like what we would call a clown straight away. No nuance necessary. Well, they are the rain bringers, the lightning bringers, and they are the offspring of the rainbow serpents. So they are Nephilim, So yeah, it's the same story. They control the weather. They have psychedelic weird powers, and I think the Nephilim didn't just rule over mankind because they were big. They had power. They had insane power. And what do you do? What do people do? You know, they sacrifice for harvest, for good rain. You know,
Right.
to
Well,
have a good season, a wet season, so we can have a bountiful harvest. You know, and I think
right.
that's why.
The offspring of Noah, being the Zadokites, they were the rain men that came in and would bring, the refreshing, rain for the crops. It's, yeah, interesting.
Mm.
Gentlemen, Paul,
Ha ha ha.
super fascinating, mate. We just ram-packed with information that incredible, mate. Incredible.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed
Loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Before you
great.
go anywhere, mate. Yeah, it was mid-money, mate. Before you go anywhere, do you want to let everybody know they can get hold of you, please, Paul?
Absolutely. So all my work is predominantly on YouTube. I have a series on there at Understanding Conspiracy. That's the channel's name, Understanding Conspiracy. And if you find it, I've got about 40,000 subs. So that'll be the one. Click on that one. And go to my playlist section. And under there, you'll find I cover a lot of topics, but there is one specifically called The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. And you'll find a 42 episode series there breaking down all of this from how I discovered it back in 2016 and where my work has taken me over the past 8 years to explain all of this basically to where I am today. I am writing the book on this subject. There's a GoFundMe in the links to every video on my channel to go and pre-order your copy if you want to. All the explanation is there to where to find how to do that and where to figure that all out. I'm about halfway through the book. I'm about 17 chapters in. I've planned 30, so hopefully by the end of the year it should be published. It should be published and ready to go. I'm trucking along with it every week. I'm writing a few pages, so it's kind of getting along when I can do it. I'm a family man, I'm self-employed. I'm very busy, so I do what I can when I can. But it's trucking along nicely, and the support's been wonderful for that. So come to YouTube to find me, and from there you can join my Telegram group. I've got about 1,000 members in there. We share all sorts of things on there. We talk back and forth. It's a really nice, solid community if you want to join that as well. I'm on Rumble now, Understanding Conspiracy. You can go find me on Rumble. I'm in the process of backing up all of my backlog of work on there. It's a long process, but I am transferring everything onto that as a backup. And I think that's everywhere I am. Yeah, you can. I have a Patreon too if you're interested with extra content.
Very nice.
Oh, mate. And Robbie, do you want to let everyone know they can get hold of you, please?
Yeah, I've got the MetaMindcast that I do as far as the podcast. But if you want to see my art, or any of my Instagram, Facebook, etc., check out my Linktree, which is RMARX, all one word, and that'll pull up all my links.
Brilliant, mate. Thanks again, Paul. Quality, that, mate.
No problem.
I'll stop. Nice one, mate. I'm going to stop recording now, but please don't go anywhere.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that, mate.